You are doing something right now that no other animal on Earth can do quite like you. You are turning invisible thoughts into sounds, and those sounds are landing inside another mind and becoming thoughts again. You call this talking. But for most of human history, it did not exist. And the question of what your ancestors did instead reveals something strange and deeply unsettling about what you actually are. Here is what the fossil record tells you. For roughly 2 million years, your ancestors walked upright, made tools, lived in groups, raised children, and survived on a planet full of things trying to kill them. They did all of this without a single word. Not because they were stupid. Not because they were animals in the simple sense. But because the machinery for language had not yet clicked into place. And yet they survived. And they thrived. And in some ways, they may have understood each other in a way you have almost entirely forgotten how to do. So what did they actually do all day? The first thing you have to understand is that silence was not empty. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford University has spent decades studying the social lives of primates, and his research suggests that before language, your ancestors were doing something that modern humans still do but rarely talk about. They were grooming. Not just picking parasites off each other's backs, though that happened too. They were using physical touch as the primary currency of social bonding. A hand on a shoulder. A reassuring grip. A careful examination of another body that said, without words, I see you. I'm not a threat. You matter to me. Dunbar's research shows that grooming in primates can consume up to 20% of the day. For early humans living in groups of 30 to 50 individuals, that number may have been even higher. Every relationship had to be maintained by direct physical contact. There was no way to check in from a distance. There was no way to send a signal across the fire. If you wanted to remain connected to someone, you had to be near them, touching them, present with them in a way that most modern humans find difficult to even imagine. This was not weakness. This was infrastructure. Now consider what it meant to make a decision. Imagine your group is camped near a river and the water has started to smell different. Something is wrong. An elder in the group has seen this before. She needs to communicate not just urgency but direction, not just danger but the specific shape of the threat. She cannot say the water upstream is contaminated, we should move east toward higher ground. So what does she do? She points. She makes a sound in her throat. She picks up her tools and begins walking east. And because the group has spent years watching each other, reading each other, feeling the emotional weight of each other's movements, they follow. Not because they were told, but because they understood. Paleoanthropologist Ian Tattersall at the American Museum of Natural History argues that early humans were capable of what he calls proto-symbolic behavior, a kind of meaning-making that stopped short of full language but was far richer than simple animal signaling. They used gesture. They used gaze direction. They used the orientation of the body to convey intention. They used rhythm, the repeated striking of a stone against another stone, not just to make tools but perhaps to signal, to coordinate, to anchor a group activity in shared time. Think about that for a moment. Rhythm may be older than words. Researchers studying the Homo heidelbergensis fossils from roughly 600,000 years ago have found evidence of tools so sophisticated that their construction would have required a kind of cognitive planning that implies shared knowledge. Someone had to teach someone else how to make a bifacial hand axe. That teaching could not have been purely accidental. It was intentional transmission of skill from one mind to another. But it happened without vocabulary, without grammar, without explanation in any form you would recognize today. It happened through demonstration, through imitation, through the ancient and extraordinarily powerful practice of watching another person do something until your own body understood it. Your ancestors learned by seeing. Your body still carries this instinct. It is why you unconsciously mirror the posture of someone you trust. It is why watching a skilled craftsperson at work can feel almost like a memory. The mirror neuron system in your brain, first described by neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti and his team at the University of Parma, activates whether you are performing an action or watching someone else perform it. Your brain does not cleanly distinguish between doing and observing. It never fully evolved past the ancient social technology of learning through presence. What did they do before language? They watched. They touched. They moved together. They ate together, and eating was not a private act. The communal sharing of food was one of the most socially complex behaviors early humans engaged in. Primatologist Richard Wrangham at Harvard has argued that the control of fire, which your ancestors may have been using as far back as 1 million years ago, transformed not just diet but social structure. Cooking made food easier to eat, which shortened mealtime, which freed up hours in the day for something else. It also created a gathering point. A fire at the center of a camp is an invitation. Says, this is where we are. This is where you belong. Come sit with us. And so they sat. And they looked at each other across the flames. And they made sounds. Not language yet, not quite. But the sounds were not random. Researchers studying the vocal calls of great apes, your closest living relatives, find that those calls carry emotional information with remarkable precision. Fear sounds different from excitement. Aggression carries a different frequency than contentment. Before your ancestors had words, they had tone. They had the raw emotional signal that still rides underneath every sentence you speak today. When someone says they are fine but their voice carries a tremble, you know they are not fine. That knowing is ancient. That knowing is 2 million years old. Now here is the part that scientists are still debating. When did it actually change? When did the gesture and the grunt and the gaze transform into something you would recognize as language? The honest answer is that no one is entirely sure. The anatomy required for complex speech, the descended larynx, the fine motor control of the tongue, the specific configuration of the hyoid bone, shows up gradually in the fossil record somewhere between 300,000 and 100,000 years ago. But anatomy is not language. A parrot has the anatomy for speech and produces only noise. Language is a social technology. It has to be invented, shared, maintained, and passed on. The best current evidence suggests that something like proto-language, a system of symbols with meaning but without full grammar, may have existed as far back as 200,000 years ago in early Homo sapiens. But the explosion, the moment when language suddenly became rich and recursive and capable of talking about things that were not present, things that had happened, things that might happen, things that existed only in imagination, that explosion seems to have happened much later. Some researchers point to the behavioral revolution around 50,000 years ago, when cave art appears, when beads and ornaments appear, when the archaeological record suddenly fills with evidence of symbolic thought. Something changed. And whatever it was, it left a world that looked suddenly recognizably like yours. But here is the counterintuitive truth that no one prepares you for. Language did not give your ancestors the ability to coordinate or connect or understand each other. They had been doing all of that for 2 million years without it. What language gave them was something more specific and more dangerous. It gave them the ability to lie. It gave them the ability to talk about people who were not present. It gave them the ability to build shared fictions, stories about gods and origins and rules that had no physical existence but that could bind together groups of strangers who had never touched each other and never would. Historian and philosopher Yuval Noah Harari has argued that this is the real revolution. Not communication but fiction. Not the ability to say there is a lion by the river, but the ability to say there is a spirit in the mountain who demands that we share our food. Before language, your ancestors could only cooperate with people they knew. With people they had groomed and eaten with and watched across a fire. Language broke that ceiling. It allowed your species to scale. To build cities and armies and religions and economies. To become the thing you are now, 7 billion strong and capable of coordinating across continents without ever making eye contact. And now consider what you have traded away. The 2 million years of deep physical presence. The social intelligence built in silence. The reading of a body across a fire that needed no words because words would only have gotten in the way. You still have this. It is still in you. You feel it when someone you love walks into a room and you know immediately, without them saying anything, that something is wrong. You feel it when a stranger on a train catches your eye for 1 second too long and your whole nervous system shifts. You feel it when you stand in a crowd and the mood changes before anyone has spoken. Tonight, you will probably have a conversation. Words will go back and forth and meaning will travel between minds and you will call it communication. And it is. But underneath every sentence, underneath every carefully chosen word, the older system is still running. Watching. Touching. Reading the silences between the sounds. Your ancestors spent 2 million years perfecting that system. Language is only the newest layer on top of it. And sometimes, the newest layer is the noisiest but not always the deepest. You have been talking for 50,000 years. But you have been listening, really listening, for much longer than that.